Good morning, all. I wish to welcome our witnesses who are already here with us. We ended on our last occasion with the Honorable Minister, Dr. Samuel Joseph, P.S. Fergus, the manager of the airport, Mr. Joseph Irish, and our senior air traffic officer, Mr. Zhuan Sweeney. I also want to welcome back those who are joining us via Radio Montserrat and through the various mediums of social media. Just to remind us of our housekeeping rules, these proceedings are recorded and forms part of the transcripts and records of the report. We are being broadcasted, as we just said, through Radio Montserrat and social media platforms. So we ask that you speak clearly. The committee will ask questions and invite witnesses to clarify questions if necessary. Witnesses may advance suggestions, solutions, and recommendations. Please note we are not here to answer questions. However, if there's a question you wish to ask, we will record this and seek an answer where it advances the work of the purpose of the committee. Witnesses and the organization may be asked to provide further documentation or information to assist the work of the committee. Witnesses, please bear in mind that you may refer to your legal attorney or your institutions for advice on answering questions. The committee reserves the right to recall witnesses and request further information in its various forms. So we will now continue from where we left off. We were addressing the issue, and I am subject to correction, of the night security. That's where we had reached. P.S. Fergus was in the middle of giving evidence when unfortunately we were interrupted. P.S. Fergus? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Yes. You may wish to just, you want to recap a bit? Go back from where, yes?
Right, yes. So, Madam Chair, was speaking about the airport security on a whole and how we got to the situation with the night security being discontinued. So I would just recap a little bit on what we would have indicated prior. In 2019, the ministry made a submission to Cabinet to increase the number of airport security staff, recognizing the need to be compliant with the regulations that govern the airport and aviation security on a whole. This was considered by Cabinet and eventually withdrawn. And the matter again raised its head in 2021 when ASI placed the airport on notice with a threat of suspension or revocation of the aerodrome license. Cabinet subsequently approved 6 additional posts to comply with the regulations and to be in harmony with the Montserrat Labour Code. This would have allowed us to operate shifts of 6 hours only, which means that security workers would have been working fewer hours than their equivalent counterparts in the public service. And this allows us to provide adequate cover for training and leave of all kinds. So whether sick leave, vacation leave, without compromising the aviation security protocols which would have been in place. Subsequent to that, the airport was reclassified and that classification changed from Tier 1 to Tier 2, which means it just recognized that our airport doesn't handle aircraft of a maximum takeoff mass greater than 10,000 kilograms, right? And because of that, it allows us to provide a more flexible approach to security measures, the aviation security measures. That notwithstanding, the governor, on the recommendations of the National Civil Aviation and Maritime Security Committee, opted to maintain protocols similar to that of Tier 1, which is why we continue to enjoy unimpeded, unfettered travel when we go overseas. So I know that has been a concern. So nothing in our security protocols has been downgraded as a result of the change from Tier 1 to Tier 2. So the traveling public does not have to worry about that. Above and beyond that, the governor further took a risk-based decision to discontinue the night security officers at the airport. And so once we go from operational hours to non-operational hours, the security of the airport transfers from the airport authority over to the Royal Montserrat Police Service, who are responsible for the compound during the non-operational hours. So the aviation security officers then take back up from the Royal Montserrat Police Service in the morning and conduct a thorough sweep to ensure that we are ready for operations daily. And that, in essence, is the situation at the airport. I should point out that aviation security protocols do not obtain during the non-operational hours, and as a result, they are not regulated. So basically, the night time is not regulated by ASI. Regulated operations happen when the airport is open for service.
Just for clarity, who then is responsible for the nighttime when there are no operations, so to speak?
When there are no operations, the Royal Montserrat Police Service is responsible for the compound,
Okay.
and that on the authority of the governor.
May I ask a question, please? I think, Honorable PS, you said that the governor made the decision to abolish night security. Was that done in consultation with you, Honorable Minister, or with the PS? Honorable Minister, could you tell us, please?
The answer to that question is no, I was not consulted.
Then once you discovered and may have had concerns, how did you deal with that matter with the governor?
I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, Honorable, I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm sure you're aware that many concerns have been raised about not having night security. You yourself spoke to that in the Assembly, where you explained the risks with not having night security. How did you address that matter with the governor, since you had that concern?
The question I was asked in the Assembly, what if you don't have night security, and I'm saying that there is night security. As the PS pointed out, the Royal Montserrat Police Service is now responsible for night security at the airport. So whether the question unless we're implying that the Royal Montserrat Police Service is not competent to carry out that, I'm not sure I understand the concern.
Okay, maybe I should ask, is the Royal Montserrat Police there all night? Do they patrol it? Are they replacing the security officers who were there before? Do they do the same duty as those officers?
I won't be able to answer the actual, how much they patrol or when they go or how much hours they do or what's the replacement, but what we're being told, as the PS point out, is that the governor has handed over the security of the airport or the responsibility for the night security of the airport to the Royal Montserrat Police Service. If there's issues with that, I guess it's something that the committee can ask, how good are they functioning, and does the police themselves think that they're capable of carrying out that duty, but I won't be able to answer that.
So you are not aware, you yourself have not questioned or checked yourself?
I have not received any reports from the police or from anybody that have indicated that they're not able to carry out such duties.
Okay, may I ask a question then, and it's an open one along the same lines. Maybe I should ask the airport manager. How does removal of night security, as you had before, with 2 officers at night, how does it affect the integrity of the airport operations?
Well, to say, it affects the airport in somewhat because you remember we have equipment there that is very expensive. So take in consideration the air traffic control unit, they have the weather instruments there. So if somebody man for to get into the compound, they could jeopardize the readings and stuff of those equipment. So also the airport have other sensitive equipments that are exposed to that. And basically, if we don't have adequate security presence there, it means that we are at risk because you don't know exactly what transpired during those hours when they are not manned. One will say, yes, you have CCTV, but is the limitations that the CCTV have presently?
Is the CCTV system working at present?
Yes, it is working, but it don't cover the entire.
Could you tell me since when it's been working? I'm told that it was not working at some time.
It didn't work for about a couple of days, not no long period of time.
Good. Wonderful. Now, Mr. Nigel Harris, when he appeared before this committee, said he had serious concerns about not having night security for his airplanes and his insurance coverage. I think he said something of that nature. I'm not so sure. So I'm asking the Honourable Minister, in the event that there's negligence with security at the airport, and well, of course, the question is who becomes liable? Who pays the bill if legal action is taken? If Fly Montserrat has damage to its aircraft and it becomes associated with the fact that the night security was not efficient, what was replaced contributed to the breach or the risk, does the government of Montserrat become liable financially?
Honorable Romeo, I recognize that you directed the question to the minister. However, I will field this one because under the Overseas Territories Aviation Regulations, responsibility for aircraft security rests with the aircraft operator and not with the airport authority. And I should also point out that security rests squarely with the governor, and she has our present governor has recognized that and taken responsibility for that.
To be more accurate, my question was, what if there's negligence on the part of the governor who then faces the consequences of paying for a failure, a breach? That's the question. Let's say she fails, or her decision turns out to be the wrong one in removing night security. It contributes to damage to the aircraft or anything else, any other compromise. I'm asking the minister, this is for government. Is government liable? Who pays the bill?
Again, I'm not sure what's not clear has been stated based on our laws and regulation. The security and safety of the aircraft lies with the operator, and security of the compound lies with the governor. And as the PS has pointed out, she has taken responsibility for the security protocols that are in place. I'm not sure what's not clear.
The question is, who becomes liable when there's negligence in fulfilling those roles? You may not be able to answer, but I'm asking you the question. Who becomes liable? Does it come from the consolidated fund if somebody sues, if Nigel sues or Mr. Harris sues? Does it come from a consolidated fund? Does it come from a fund that the governor has? Who pays the cost? If there's loss of life as a result of it, who's responsible?
As I pointed out, well, what the court decides, lawyers would decide it in a court of law, but the only thing I can tell you, I can't tell the result of a potential hypothetical trial. All I can do is to tell you what the law currently states. It can't be for me, Chair and members, for me to hypothesize what would happen. The law states the aircraft carrier is responsible, and we know the authority, the governor, who is responsible for security. What the court decides, the lawyers would decide that.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Yes, my next question is to the air traffic control or manager in particular. Are air traffic control officers able to identify when meteorological conditions are below the minima to operate VFR flights? Can you explain what below the minima means?
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, air traffic controllers are trained and competent meteorological observers. We were trained at the CIMH Institute in Barbados, and we could spot when conditions go below VMC for VFR operations. VFR operations operating conditions where visibility, horizontal visibility is 5 kilometers or more, or we have a cloud ceiling of 1,500 feet or above, which makes basically like good weather conditions that is safe for flight using visual.
Please explain what VFR means.
Visual flight rules.
Visual flight rules.
You're flying visually. You're not using instruments.
Okay. Is the John A. Osborne Airport a prior permissions request PPR operated airport? And can you explain why and what PPR means?
Morning again. Yes, the John A. Osborne Airport is a prior permission required request airport. This was a measure implemented some years ago where private pilots who have to request permission to land at the airport due to the difficult nature of the airport. That located on the top of a hill wind conditions, short runway, etc. Before landing, they would have had to be checked flight, meaning you have the check pilots check them out, with an approved check pilot. And the check pilots are specified and listed by ASI. ASI approved the check pilots. So for their familiarity of the aerodrome, in operating into the aerodrome.
Maybe I should ask another question before I ask a question that's supplemental to those two. Can you explain what look-see procedure is and whether it's applied to Johnny Osborne Airport?
The look-see procedure, when John Osborne Airport was officially opened in 2005, we were a Class D airspace. Then, however, a few years later on, ASI changed the airspace to Class G. During the Class D airspace, when conditions go below VFR, a controller watching the weather conditions could deem whether it would be safe to operate that flight, and we would normally suspend VFR flights, and that's in Class D. However, changing to Class G now, we cannot suspend flights, even if the conditions go below the VFR conditions. So a pilot could depart Antigua, even if the conditions are below VMC, and proceed to Montserrat. And the pilot now would make the call whether they want to land in unfavorable conditions. And we were told now, even if they land, we would have to report them. And as Joseph said earlier, we are PPR airport, which has difficult conditions in a good day with VMC, but adding the element of weather, where we go below VMC, a pilot still has the right to choose to operate, even if the difficult conditions increase.
So when classified as D, you, the air traffic controller, would have the last say?
Yeah, we could suspend VFR flights if we deem is weather conditions below.
However, with Class G, it's the pilot that decides.
Yeah.
And I know when we interviewed you before, you expressed a concern on this matter. Could you clarify what that concern is, please?
Well, as you said, the PPR, you state that the Johnny Osborne Airport is a difficult one. And this is in conditions that visibility is more than 5, ceilings is more than 1,500 feet. But you say it's difficult. However, when the conditions go below the 5 kilometers and below 1,500 feet, the cloud below 1,500 feet, we can't suspend flights, but a pilot could still come and land at the airport. So how is it dangerous in a good day, but less dangerous when the weather gets bad?
And I must ask, clearly you don't seem in agreement with the change. Can you explain to us whether this concern has been raised with the governor and ASI?
We have multiple meetings with ASI about this, but he hasn't changed. We're still Class G.
So you're saying that if a pilot is about to land, and you're of the view that it's not safe for them to land, you do not have the last say?
No, the pilot can land, but ASI asks us to make a report if they land in that condition.
If that same aircraft will be landing in Antigua, who has the last say?
Well, VC Bird could suspend VFR flights.
So you're saying a safer airport, the air traffic controller has the power to say, no, you shouldn't land. But you don't have that same authority. When was that changed?
Was that 2016, 15, 16?
Around 15, 16, around that period.
Yeah. Around 2015, 2016, sometime around that period.
So you're saying for 7 years, this concern has been raised? and it has remained.
Yep.
Thank you. You.
Before we move on to the next one, I just want to clarify something. We had evidence from CSA that a letter was sent documenting their concerns about the safety of the airport. Minister, you received that letter? You're aware of it? Or an email, maybe I should say? Oh, I'm sorry. The president of the Civil Service Association. My apology.
It's the first I'm hearing of this, Madam Chair. And the answer to your question, no, I have not received that letter.
You haven't seen a copy of the letter either.
I wasn't aware of the existence of such a letter until you asked me the question just now.
Which letter? December 13th.
I'll refresh your memory. Yes? Maybe it's the way I've worded the question. Were you copied into a letter?
December 13th.
You have the copy of the letter?
I was confused.
Once the airport matters. Once the airport matters.
Not asking the one from the president. Remember the president?
This one?
No, president of CSA.
Okay, okay.
President of CSA.
Oh, that.
That letter, yes.
No, not this.
Civil Service Association, Madam President was here as a witness.
She made a public statement and she said that she shared her communications on the matter with everyone. That's what you're referring to,
Yes.
Madam Chair?
No, you are copied. You were copied into a letter online, but you did not. The letter was not written directly to yourself.
No, the letter was addressed to the governor. It was not addressed to the airport manager. I was copied into it. So I wouldn't respond on behalf of the governor.
Say that again, sorry.
I wouldn't respond on behalf of the governor because the letter was not addressed to me. It was addressed to the governor.
So are you saying therefore it's the governor who would respond to that letter?
Correct.
Thank you.
Looking at the same response, Madam Chair. The letter was addressed to Your Excellency Governor Tucker, 1st June 2023.
The concerns that were raised, not to belabor the point, there were a number of concerns that were raised in that letter. Are you satisfied that with the implementation of the new security protocol for night, that those are taken care of? I know you don't have a copy of the letter. If you'll have I know it's quite extensive. And you have indicated you don't have it, so yeah.
And in a brief way, in the briefest way as possible, the president of the CSA raised some concerns about security and safety of the airport with the removal of night security. So, essentially, we just want to know, and you did mention some safety protocols that are in place now, for example, RMP has taken over night security. So, in the briefest form, are you satisfied with safety protocols currently in place at the airport?
I won't offer an opinion on satisfaction. I will restate what I've said before. The governor is responsible under the OTAs for security protocols at the airport. And so satisfaction has to rest with the governor with respect to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I wanted to get that. We had that evidence before us, so I wanted to address it. Just for clarity, we also, airport manager, this one is specifically, I believe, for you. We also received evidence from Madam President in her capacity as a citizen of this country and a resident of the neighboring environs, of the alarm going off and going for an extensive period at night. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
Is there anything being done to address that situation?
A procedure was placed in the fire station for the fire officers to turn off the crash alarm on when the operation ended on a daily basis.
Okay.
So they switch it off when they leave at the end of the day, the day of end of operation, and then when they come in the morning, they will switch it back on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that situation should not be continuing.
I would say as long as they remember to turn it off.
For clarity, is this a safety or security concern?
No, it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me just go on.
Well, when I heard that statement by the president, I went back in the records to verify if there was any report made by the night security on the crash alarm being sounded. I went back about a year or so, and no report was was made in the security rosters or in their incident logs, right? So it was strange to hear this coming from her. However,
If I may qualify, remember she's saying is since our accustomed night security, the night security that we had in place prior to the governor's decision. It is since that the alarm has been going off. And if I'm correct, I would think she said it was quite recent, just before she gave. All right, so remember, physically, we don't have that particular night security, but the police, are you referring to the police now as the night security, that they need to log that as well? I just want clarity.
well, for clarity, I know I only received one call from the police when that alarm was sounding at night. Yeah, but
And you haven't had any more at this point?
there was more, but the police didn't report it. At least not to me.
What's the purpose of the alarm, may I ask?
The crash alarm is there for in case we have any incident at the airport, like aircraft incident. The air traffic controllers will press that alarm to alert the fire department so that they will respond to the site, the incident site.
So why would an alarm go off if it's not triggered?
Presently, we were experiencing some little glitches with the crash alarm. However, with the new air traffic control tower, we acquire a new crash alarm, but we not hook it up yet because we still have to continue using the old airport, the old tower. So it's there installed, yes, but it's not hooked up. So until it's hooked up, that conditions will still exist until we put it in operation.
Do you have daily reports or morning reports each morning from the police about what may have transpired overnight? Is there any handover procedure to the security in the daytime, informing the management or staff, anybody?
To date, I haven't seen no report from the police.
Again, just for the records, the crash alarm is relevant for day operations when aircrafts are flying. Is that what it's for?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you kindly, you want to continue? Could you kindly explain who ICAO is, please? No, I shall follow this.
ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization. They are the ones responsible for setting the recommendations and some standards for airports throughout the world.
Yes, well, we were advised that the ICAO runway classification of runway type would place Johnny Osborne as a 1B type runway, making RISA a recommendation and not a requirement. Can you kindly explain why ASI has made the RISA a requirement at the Johnny Osborne Airport?
Okay, ICAO has made it, with their classification, yes, we are 1B. And for you to ask why, you would have to refer to ASI as a regulator for that one, because they were the ones who changed it. It wasn't done by the airport. So you would have to ask ASI as to why they implement the RISA.
Can you let us know what year the RISA was implemented? Or when it became a requirement?
The RISA was implemented at the Johnny Osborne Airport in 2016, and it was enforced in the last quarter of 2022.
So for 6 years, it moved from being a recommendation to a requirement. Is that correct?
It was implemented in 2016, but enforced in 2022.
But was it a requirement in 2016?
As long as it's implemented, it's a requirement.
So can you explain why it was not enforced until 2022?
Well, the enforcement came from ASI, so we cannot give you the exact reason why it was enforced. So you'd have to pass the question on to ASI.
This first. This first. Honorable Minister.
Sorry.
You want to go? No, go. Honorable Minister, are you aware of a December 13th, 2022 letter written to Sweeney, by ASI regarding sorry, I take that back. Let me share the letter. I don't know who I should ask this, but I'll ask it. So there's a letter written to a Mr. Awai, December 13, 2022, and it's from Air Safety Support International, and it's communicating with them regarding the operation of the Twin Otter and making certain requirements of the Twin Otter on that date. Is that when this RISA was being enforced that you're referring to? Is that the date?
We are unaware of the letter that you're reading, you're stating, but however, it was just before they were written too.
Sorry, Mr. Irish, just for your benefit, is it that you need more background on this matter? Do you wish to see the letter to which Mr. Romeo is referring? If you require it to be put into context.
I don't have to see the letter because it wasn't written to me. I wasn't included in that letter, so I'm not aware of that letter.
So what you're saying is you can't provide a response to Mr. Romeo?
No.
Thank you.
Honourable Minister, are you aware of this letter? Were you aware of it before today?
I was aware a letter was written to Winnie. I've not seen the actual letter. As Mr. Irish pointed out, it was written to Winnie, it was written to local officials. It's a letter from ASI, as you've stated, to Winnie.
And PS, is that the same for you?
I may have seen it from somebody sharing it, but not officially.
Well, sorry, I was of the assumption that this was something that you'd be aware of, so it'd be unfair for me to question you as necessary. So I'll hold on that for now. That's okay. I'll reserve that for the governor and for ASI and others. So it would be unfair for me to question you on that right now. So I'll let that be. Thank you. Just a question that was posed to me recently. Is there a safety officer at the Johnny Osborne Airport?
Not at the moment. When I was the senior air traffic controller, I was conducting double role, where I was the senior air traffic controller and occupying the safety officer role in question, not being paid for it, but I was doing the two roles. As a matter of fact, there was a finding from ASI where we were supposed to implement a quality and safety officer at the airport, but we had some challenges getting it done because I don't know what the politics behind it or the funding aspect behind it, but we put forward our business cases to try to get that position filled. But to date, it was never put in place.
I'm sorry, can you recall when that discussion started?
It was around 2018, 2019, around that time. We were trying to get that finding addressed by circulating business cases. It was before the present PS.
Before the present PS? Okay.
Yeah.
What would that person do in a nutshell, if you can? Because I know you don't have the job description.
Well, that person will do all the quality checks. He will do internal audits, and so in preparation for ASI's visit. So we'll conduct internal audits on the operation of the airport before ASI comes.
Okay.
So, and do safety assessments of the airport and all these different things.
So who undertakes that now?
Well, really and truly, right now, we kind of share it in one sense where we'll ask Mr. Sweeney to maybe conduct an internal audit on fire because he can't do it on the tower because he works with the tower.
Okay.
So we do that to try to satisfy the requirement. But it's not really ideal because.
And who will test the tower now?
Tower, you will ask either the chief security officer also to address certain aspects.
Assess certain things? Okay, okay. And you're saying that is still a need?
I would think so because it's very much so taxing on us to carry out all these multiple roles.
Okay. Okay. And is it preferable somebody externally carries that out as well for transparency?
I would say that is an internal role.
It's an internal role?
Yes, it's an internal role, and to add some fluff on it, he had a young lady.
Not fluff.
in some meat.
Okay.
He had a young lady who was doing the job, the task in Miss Gerald, and she was doing a very good job. So that's why we were recommending for her to be placed in that position.
Yes.
Yeah, but don't know.
Okay.
I have one last question.
Please, Mr. Romeo.
Apart from managing Fly Montserrat, what role does Mr. Nigel Harris play at the airport?
Well, he is a member of the National Civil Aviation and Maritime Security Committee. I suspect he is also a member of the Airport Facilitation and Safety Committee. Yeah. Outside of that, I would defer to the airport manager.
Isn't there some role in testing and assessing pilots?
Yes, he's one of the ASIS approved, authorized check pilots. Yeah. So he have that authority to check pilots.
So I was asked the same question this week, so I'm going to have to ask you. Does he check his own pilots? Is he assessing his own pilots as well as SVGs and others?
He used to check his own pilot, but now they have a new check pilot in Malcolm Hemsel.
Yes.
So he conducts those checks at the moment.
Very good. It's good to clear those matters up because I'm asked those questions. And thank you very much.
I'll seek to put this in context as best as I can. Given the discussions and concerns regarding our runway, are there any considerations being given to other options at this time by the ministry? And if it's not the ministry's response, then please can you tell us? And if anything has been undertaken in respect of this?
We are looking at the feasibility of extending the current runway and whether there are alternative sites in which another runway can be placed. That is under discussion.
I know you're not pilots and you're not in the business of purchasing airplanes, but are there any considerations given to other types of aircrafts that might be suitable for John A. Osborne Airport?
I'm aware that a study was commissioned by the governor's office to answer that very question. So yes, the answer to the question is yes, there are people looking at what other aircrafts can come into the airport, or what kind of aircrafts are suitable for the airport.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
You want to know if I have any questions along that line, Madam Chair?
Or anything else?
Well,
We've also heard about the possibility of nighttime operation. We have also heard of the possibility of nighttime.
Madam Chair, it has been in the ministry's strategic plan for a number of years to move to nighttime operations. So yes, we are looking into it actively.
Actively, okay.
what I understand a risk assessment. Sorry, you're going to say something.
I was just going to add that part.
Go right ahead, sir.
Just to add some more meat to, yes, risk assessment was submitted to ASI to address the time operations by both the aerodrome, which is Johnny Osborne Airport, and also Fly Montserrat. The aerodrome do one in the interest of safety for the aerodrome itself, so it was done on behalf of the aerodrome. But however, I would assume that Fly Montserrat would have submitted it on behalf of their operation, because each operator would have to do one to satisfy them operating during the night.
Did you share your risk assessment with Fly Montserrat?
I will probably say yes, because that allowed them to be able to submit theirs.
And did Fly Montserrat share their risk assessment with you?
I will gladly say, but not happy with it. No, they don't.
This risk assessment is recent, but there was a time when we had night flights prior to this. Was one done prior to that to determine whether we should have night flights or not?
We used to operate night medivacs in the past, where we would do flights only out for life-saving purposes only. However, a few years ago, it was stopped by ASI, and we have never restarted that since. So.
Can you tell us why it was stopped, please? Your mic.
Well, I will read and quote from the letter that was received, or email that was received from ASI.
Please.
Which was addressed to Ms. Shelley Harris, Mr. Shelley Harris. So the response was, and this was dated the 7th of November, 2019. Dear Shelley, I have reviewed the safety risk assessment provided by Fly Montserrat to conduct night medevac. I fully understand the emotion surrounding this situation and the desire to provide a public service to the people of Montserrat. However, this situation is not straightforward in that Montserrat has unique challenges as an airport, and the Islander aircraft is a Performance B aircraft which lacks the performance to outclimb obstacles in the extended flight path of runway 10 should it encounter an engine failure. There are different scenarios for emergency situation to consider. Firstly, the rejected takeoff, since there is no accelerate stop data available, any late rejected takeoff in the dark could lead to an undesirable, potentially catastrophic, oh Lord, forgive the tongue, consequence. Secondly, the engine failure after liftoff, since the principle of performance B in this situation is to see and avoid obstacles, it is unlikely that an emergency turn procedure off runway 10 in the dark could be executed with guaranteed success. There still remains the problem of flying VFR at night, which is currently not permitted under Rule 20 of the Rules of the Air. There are currently no IFR departures from Montserrat. Plus, Fly Montserrat would need to keep their pilots night current, i.e., completed 3 night takeoff and 3 landings at night. Having considered the above information, I remain unconvinced that all the risks have been successfully mitigated. I could not recommend an amendment to the governor's instructions or provide an exemption to the Rule 20 to permit emergency night medevac flights based on the current risk assessment.
So a past risk assessment, the chair is saying we need to have a copy of that, please, of that letter. You're saying that a past risk assessment deemed it inadequate for the islander to operate night flights. And you're now doing a risk assessment to determine whether the same islander could take night flights. I don't want to assume there may be something that's overlooked or some, because I would love to have night flights. Is there any material change in the runway, in the islander, in any of those circumstances described by the letter from last ASI to warrant a reopening of the risk assessment? Is there something I'm missing?
Well, apart from the RISA being enforced, which makes the takeoff run and stuff even less, nothing else has changed in terms of aircraft performance and stuff.
So you're saying that this was prior to when the RISA was enforced?
Yeah, this is 2019, the RISA was enforced in 2022.
So enforcing the RISA in 2022 would make it even more difficult. Am I correct? I'm no expert here.
Correct.
I'm correct. No more questions on that one. Oh, maybe I should ask, and this is something I would want to ask the pilot who comes after you. And if you can't answer it, it's up to you. Would the Twin Otter, carrying one passenger, or a nurse and a doctor, and 2 or 3 sick patients, be able to do that night flight under the present circumstances better than the islander?
If you go back to where the RISA was implemented, there are conditions in that state that Twin Otter could carry up to 10 passengers with the current situation. So 1 or 2 is far less than 10.
Thank you very much.
If I may intervene, I understand that letter speaks of mitigating factors. We don't have what the mitigating factors are before us. We do not have either whether these mitigating factors are going to be addressed. And we may need to put that into context. We want to be fair to all persons that we don't have, unless we get what these mitigating factors are, they were not highlighted to see, and whether they are seeking to address these. Because we've had some evidence on some other factors that are required in order for night flight to occur. So I'm just putting it because you may not have heard the evidence that we've had on night flying from, it was ASI who gave us some evidence on that.
Maybe I should then ask, was a risk assessment done to determine the suitability of the Twin Otter in doing night flights?
No, it wasn't.
To date, no.
Could you repeat, please?
To date, no.
Can we add to that and ask if any other aircraft for night flight? Suitability.
For night operations, you're asking? From the airport, we don't do risk assessments for type of aircraft. That would be the operator who would do that risk assessment for their types.
Okay, so if another operator wanted to come in, they would be responsible for that. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Honorable Minister and your team, we do not have any further questions for you at this stage. I want to reiterate that we may request or require you to assist us further if the needs arises. However, if there's anything you wish to share of your own volition or clarify, you are free to do so at this time. Yourself, Pierce, or any other, and the two gentlemen who are with us today. We give you that option as well before you leave, if there's anything.
Thank you for your time, and I hope that the answers that we gave would assist you in drafting the report, and then the ones that we couldn't answer because some of them, I think, were misdirected to the wrong persons, that will finally get the right answer to those questions.
Thank you, Honorable Minister and your team. And we would appreciate if there's anything else that you would wish us to direct to any other persons to ensure that we get the information. Please do not hesitate to contact Madam Clerk, and you can share that with us. Or like I said, any other information that may come to your attention that you believe can help the committee in its mission. We truly appreciate that. And thank you so much for giving of your time on the other occasion and again this morning. We truly, and may I say, regrettably again, we've had the airport staff even before this, but due to some challenges, we were not able to broadcast that, and we truly regret that. However, that information will be included in the report. The transcripts are going to be there. So thank you very much. And since it's the weekend, do have a wonderful weekend. Okay. Yeah, please if you will allow us just to rise for 5 minutes for a health break.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning. Yeah, I'm here.
Good morning, sir. We are sorry for the delay, but we appreciate you coming. Yes, so we will start with asking you please to state your name. Please state your name for us.
Okay, my name is Claude and
All
I'm the
right.
managing director and founder of SVG Air. We've been flying to Montserrat since 2011, and my previous business partner owned Carib Aviation, and have been flying to Montserrat since day one.
Thank you very much. Can you give us a legal structure for Fly Montserrat?
Fly Montserrat, I can only tell you about SVG Air, the legal structure, if you're asking about SVG Air. I'm not sure about Fly Montserrat. We're frozen. So you froze for a minute there.
Yes, can you please give us the legal structure for SVG?
Okay, so SVG Air is an airline licensed in the Eastern Caribbean under ECA. We have an air operator certificate issued by ECA. We've been in business since 1990. We first started operating Twin Otters in 1993. We've had 15 Twin Otters up to now. We're currently giving daily services to the government of Grenada with Twin Otters, and we're flying the Grenadines to Barbados with Twin Otters as well. And we do private charters around the region with a Citation and some Islanders and the Twin Otters. We're currently doing semi-scheduled services since 2011 to Montserrat and Barbuda from Antigua. We've been working with the government of Montserrat since 2011 to provide that service.
Can you Yes, thank you so much. Can you describe for the committee the type of aircraft that you operate in Montserrat?
Currently, we have 3 Islanders for Montserrat now. The third one will be up there in about 2 weeks. And we operate 2 to 3 flights a day for the government of Montserrat using the Islander, which is restricted to usually 7 passengers on departure because of the terrain and the elevation of the airport and the temperature. It's highly restricted. It's not a particularly profitable aircraft for either us or the government of Montserrat.
Can you say that again, please? You're a bit muffled from this.
It's not a profitable operation for neither us nor the government of Montserrat because the aircraft has only got 7 revenue seats. Is the audio, or should I put on a headset?
I don't think it may be from just a moment. Let's see.
Okay, I'll put it on. Is that any better for you?
I think it's a little better. It is a little better.
Okay. Right.
And could you please repeat the last information you shared with us?
I was saying that the Islander operation is not an ideal operation because the aircraft is only limited to 7 revenue seats. So it really doesn't make it very viable for either the passenger or the company to operate a profitable service.
Are you willing to share then why you continue to operate?
Well, at the moment, it's the only aircraft approved for Montserrat, and we have other operations that we do during the day that between the combination of that and Barbuda and charters, it pays the bills, but barely.
All right. Would you have any suggestions?
Well, I think the original plan after you lost the other airport to the volcano was the Twin Otter operation, and I think that you need to go back to that. As we all know, the airport was designed around the Twin Otter flight manual. And for years, multiple twin otters went in there doing proving flights and showing that the aircraft was capable of handling the airfield. And I think you need to go back to the British Civil Aviation Authority and get grandfather rights to continue operating twin otters, because that is the only aircraft that is actually safe and viable out of Montserrat. The Islander is extremely limited. I think you should ask for a dispensation from the governor to continue operating twin otters. It's already done the proving flights necessary to prove that it's a safe operation. And until they changed the regulations, it was a safe operation. But you know, you can overregulate any airplane until by the end of the day, you can make any aircraft look unsafe if you keep making the regulations more and more stringent and keep removing the field length and saying that the airport is no longer a certain length because they've now deemed it to be shorter than it actually is, because they put in safety buffer areas at both ends. What's the goal? I mean, you are a remote airfield. You've got very limited air access. You need a special dispensation to operate twin otters. It's that simple. It's all over the world. The twin otter is a utility aircraft, and governments that don't answer to YASA or ICAO have the authority to say that we've deemed the operation as safe and effective and required, given it's a remote situation where the airfield is in, say, northern Canada or the Antarctic or the Andes, or it's in Nepal. The aircraft is a STOL aircraft, and it should be operated as a STOL aircraft if it's a situation that requires a STOL aircraft. And Montserrat is a situation that requires a STOL aircraft. And given that the airport was designed around a twin otter flight manual, and until they changed the aircraft's performance characteristics and classification, it was perfectly safe. So I think common sense needs to prevail.
May I ask a question before I have several others? Did I hear you say that the twin otter is the only safe and viable aircraft to operate at John A. Osborne Airport?
It is. The Islander doesn't have enough seats to do any real economic, give you really any economic benefit. We've operated Islanders since 1990. I've been flying Islanders since 1985. I've got 4,000 hours in Islanders alone. So I can tell you firsthand, it's an agricultural aircraft. It's very basic. It has minimal performance. The pilots don't feel unsafe in the aircraft given where they fly it in and out of, but when you're flying into an extreme airport like Montserrat, you don't have a lot of room for error. So, I mean, if you look at it from my pilot's point of view or Fly Montserrat's point of view, if you decided that you want to live and have a lifestyle where you're home for dinner every night and you want to live in Antigua, the only airplane that you can fly daily is an Islander. So if you're going to fly 220 days a year and you're going to Montserrat 2 or 3 times a day, you're being exposed to 600 takeoffs and landings in Montserrat. And if you fly that airplane for 15 or 20 years, that's 13,000 landings. So the odds are against you. One day you're going to lose the engine on the airplane because you've flown it 13,000 times into Montserrat. It's not a very comforting feeling for the pilots. And it's one of the reasons why it's hard to keep pilots flying Islanders out of extreme runways, because they realize the odds are stacked against them. So they're looking to fly something else. They want to get paid more. They want to fly bigger aircraft. They want to fly an aircraft that's got turbine engines, because turbine engines have a failure rate of 1 every 375,000 flight hours. Piston engines have a failure rate of 1 every 3,200 flight hours. So if you're going to fly 13,000 flights, what would you prefer to be in? A PT-6 turbine-powered airplane or a piston-powered aircraft? It's all about playing the odds. The passengers might only do 20, 30 flights in that period when the pilots have done 13,000. So I think selfishly, from a pilot's point of view, we don't want to fly for the next 20 years Islanders in and out of Montserrat. We don't have a problem flying Islanders in and out of Barbuda because Barbuda doesn't have any obstacles or major challenges like Montserrat does. But Montserrat is an airport where only highly experienced pilots should be allowed to fly into. And those pilots should have special training. And they have actually put that in place. They've been very insightful and put special requirements for the airport itself. where the pilots have to be highly skilled. But, you know, let's have common sense. If you're comparing an Islander to a Twin Otter, there's no comparison for safety. It's unfortunately the British have put you into a box where you have no choice but to fly the unsafe aircraft if you're going to define it as safe or unsafe. We'll continue flying Islanders with 7 passengers or less for a little while longer, but we are going to get rid of our aircraft in the next year or two, because right now we can't get engines or undercarriages for those airplanes. So eventually, one by one, they're going to get parked, which means Montserrat's not going to have an air service going forward in the next few years because the aircraft is very poorly supported. The company that makes the engines, called Lycoming, has a 1 to 2 year waiting list to have the engines overhauled. I have 2 engines that have been at Lycoming now for a year and a half, and they're still not ready. So we have to go to other air overhaul companies which don't have the reputation of the actual manufacturer to buy engines. I'm hoping that we don't have to do that in a short or near future, because we do not want to fly engines that are not as good as the manufacturer's engines into an airfield like Montserrat, because the odds are stacking up against us. Go ahead, sorry.
I wanted to ask a question because you said a while ago that the chances of the Islander losing an engine on takeoff are greater than a Twin Otter. Is that what you said?
Yeah, at a factor of about 100 to 1.
I didn't hear that.
The factor is probably 100 to 1.
Then my question is, if safety is a priority, which then should be the aircraft to be used?
There's no question. It is a turbine-powered aircraft with STOL performance. The only one in the world that has the STOL performance with turbine engines is a Twin Otter. The Dornier doesn't have as good STOL performance as a Twin Otter, which is also a turbine-powered aircraft. And the unfortunate thing, the Dornier is not very well supported, unlike the Twin Otter, which is very well supported.
Okay, my question, for us to understand properly, I'm being advised that taking off and landing at the most critical stages of flight. What is the significance of, or the difference between a Twin Otter losing an engine on takeoff and a Twin Otter losing an engine on takeoff?
Okay, well, the difference, the Islander does not have the flying performance as the Twin Otter does when you lose an engine. The Twin Otter has a lot more power than the Islander does, by a factor of 3 times more power. So, and it's also got a much bigger wing, and the likelihood of having the engine failure in the Twin Otter is 10 times less. I think the key thing is the likelihood of losing a turbine engine on takeoff is 1/10 the chances of losing a piston engine on takeoff. And should you lose the engine on takeoff, the Twin Otter does have reverse thrust. So it can either stop, and if it's already airborne, you don't have a problem, it's going to continue flying. Well, it'll fly to Antigua, the passengers might not even know the engine is lost. If you lose an engine on an Islander, there's about a 8 to maybe 15-second window that if you lose it at the wrong time, you're going to have a real challenge. If you get a couple of 100 feet of altitude when you lose the engine, you can fly it to Antigua. But if you lose it just after you get airborne, you may not be able to put it back down because there's not enough runway remaining to stop. And you might not have enough performance to get over that hill that's at the end of the runway. And you'll be forced to try and dive to the right or to the left to fly down the valley out to the sea to get the speed, to get back some altitude to continue flying back to Antigua. But if you know the odds, why even put yourself in that position?
May I ask a question? That's takeoff. You're saying a lot there in a few minutes. If an aircraft is forced to land, landing is also an issue after having lost an engine. Can the Islander or the Twin Otter land at the Blackburn, at the Gerald's Airport, the Johnny Osborne Airport, after having lost an engine?
Both aircraft can land on one engine at Osborne. Yeah. No, not a major issue. It would only be an issue if the Islander lost the engine just after takeoff and maybe 50 to 60 feet in the air, the pilot will have a real challenge to circle around with that terrain and get back into land. He's probably more likely going to head for Antigua. The Twin Otter will climb out and can do either or. The drama in the cockpit will be a lot less for the Twin Otter pilots than that single engine, that single pilot flying that Islander. The stress level will be highly significant. Will be significantly less for the Twin Otter crew than the single pilot in the Islander.
Now, should the Islander have to go left or right, and they're not able to land at Blackburn, where will they land? At Johnny Osborne, where will they land?
They're just going to continue on to Antigua.
No, you were saying it may be difficult. You said it may be difficult for them to climb over the obstacle ahead.
If they can't climb over the obstacle, have to pull the power back and land what's in front of them.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I said if they can't make the turn left or right, they'll end up having to land on the hill in front of them.
And
Or run off the runway at the end.
Okay. Then I'll ask another question as far as landing under normal circumstances. How do the brakes in the Twin Otter compare to the brakes in the Islander? How does their capability to brake and land at landing, how do you compare them?
So the advantage that the Twin Otter has over the Islander is the Twin Otter has reverse thrust. So if the Twin Otter is to have a brake failure, it can still stop with reverse thrust. If an Islander has a brake failure, it has no reverse thrust. If an Islander loses one brake, its braking efficiency probably is reduced by about 80%. If a Twin Otter loses one brake, it still has reverse thrust and it's going to be able to stop. Or it can continue, or it will be able to go because it has the power to do a go around. The Islander has a short window to do a go around. If it touches down, the pilots realize early that they haven't got brakes, they can power up, and if they're not too heavy and there's a good wind, they can climb out. If they lose an engine at that point, they're going to be in real trouble. Whereas if the Twin Otter loses an engine, it'll be able to fly out. You know, as you can see, since time immemorial, the Islander doesn't have any real issues in Montserrat, but every once in a while things line up and then things are stacked against you.
Question, without the reverse thrust, how do the brakes of the Islander and the Twin Otter compare?
The Twin Otter has better brakes than the Islander. They're much bigger and more beefy, for sure. What maybe people don't know is the Twin Otter, when you're landing in Montserrat, the airplane can stop in about a third of the runway when you use brakes and reverse thrust. The civil aviation authorities around the world have made it a stipulation that you cannot use the graphs in the flight manual that show you that when you use full brakes and reverse thrust, that the airplane easily handles Montserrat. What they say is you must assume the worst case scenario when you're landing at any airfield, that your reverse thrust does not work. So the interesting thing with that is the Islander doesn't even have that option. So you must pretend that the reverse thrust doesn't work, even though you're going to use it. So it basically is designed so you don't get yourself in trouble. But this is a STOL aircraft and it's designed for short runways. That's the purpose of this tool. It's not like it's an Avro or it's a Dash 8 or it's an ATR. This airplane is designed as a STOL aircraft for short runways. And until they changed the regulations recently, it still was a STOL aircraft able to fly into short runways. You know, we're living in a nanny state. You get these regulators that every year they add more regulations, more restrictions. By the end of it, you won't be able to fly anything into Montserrat and they'll be handing you, I mean, to go from sublime to ridiculous, to be telling you, you have to put on a helmet, you have to put on your life jacket, and you have to have your own fire extinguisher on every flight. I mean, they're just getting more and more restrictive in aviation worldwide. They have nothing better to do than make more and more regulations.
No. You can't. Jesus.
Sorry, I'm not hearing any of that.
Let me just
Back.
ask him. Mr. Gavel, I wish to apologize to yourself and the committee for the intervention we had. If you can just clarify for me, given the limitation, what's your views, given your experience, as you have stated for the record, what's your views on the limitation placed on the Twin Otter in taking off in terms of passenger numbers?
I think the aircraft from before they put the RISA in for safety, that we would be comfortable flying the Twin Otter out of Montserrat with 16 passengers and their luggage to Antigua. I mean, that was the point where we thought we were being maybe a bit over safe on it, but 16 we were very comfortable with number of 16 passengers, 16 adult passengers. You know, let me just add something. I've been here in the Caribbean, and I'm a West Indian now. I don't want to go back to Canada. I much prefer it here. I don't identify as a Canadian anymore. But I've been through the Canadian licensing system, the American licensing system, the British licensing system in order to hold my licenses here. I have watched them change the regulations now 4 times. And in 4 times, we've had to rewrite all our manuals and change everything the way we operate. And it's been horrendous. It's put most of the companies out of business. The British CA went through the Grenadines in the early 90s and basically bowled out all the companies that were flying the Grenadines, because the Grenadines have short little runways, just like Montserrat. And they deemed all the operators unsafe. So a few of us had already gotten STOL aircraft, and we managed to survive 3 of their insurrections. But they had bowled us out, or at least they had thought they had bowled us out of Mesquite, which was our #1 destination. And fortunately for us, the island of Mesquite, because it's the British royal family has a home there, and several British MPs have a home there, and many of them are billionaires, they had connections with the British CAA in the UK. And they spoke to them, and the British CAA said that they should work with a university called Cranfield Aeronautical University to certify the aircraft that we were flying into Mesquite. So the Mesquite company hired Cranfield Aeronautical University to do testing and proving flights to prove that SVG Air aircraft were safe to be operated into Mesquite. So after 2 weeks of test flying the aircraft with a test pilot from Cranfield University, they published a documentation that the British CA accepted and then allowed SVG Air to continue servicing Mesquite since 1997 to today. Now, I know that they're going to come through these same islands down here soon with the RISA nonsense, and we may be in the exact same position as you are right now. But common sense has to prevail. We cannot build bridges between Antigua and Montserrat, and you've already proven that the airport is safe with Twin Otters. You may want to approach the British CAA and say, look, is there something we can do with proving flights and Cranfield University to recertify the Twin Otter into Montserrat? And put that to bed one time. Because right north of you, you've got Staba with Win Air, operating Twin Otters into an airport that's 600 feet shorter than yours with a cliff at both ends. So if the Dutch can stand up to EASA and ICAO and say, thank you very much for your recommendations and suggestions, but we're quite happy with the Twin Otter flying in and out of Saba. The island needs it. It's vital to the economy. And we have deemed it to be a safe operation because we've done risk assessments and we've done 25,000 proving flights to show that it is safe. So thank you very much for your recommendations. Just buzz off. It takes a country to tell ICAO and EASA to buzz off. They try to overregulate everything. If you leave them in charge, there'll be no aviation because flying is dangerous. Catching a van to work is dangerous. Having a bath with soap, you may slip and break your neck, is dangerous. It's all about risk acceptance and mitigation. Common sense needs to prevail. The people of Montserrat can go to the airport and watch these airplanes take off, and they can say, that looks like a safe plane. That was a questionable takeoff. It barely got off the runway. What do I want to fly on? I want to fly on that plane because it took off and looked like a homesick angel. It climbed so well out of Montserrat. Common sense needs to prevail, and you need to get the governor in a room with some sophisticated aviation people and say, come on, let's put common sense into place here.
Regarding the letter we mentioned earlier, have you seen the letter from the ASI to Winair?
Yes, I spoke to Mike at Winair, the chief pilot of Winair. Here's the problem, and I'm not, hope I'm not calling him out, right? Winair operates under the Dutch. The Dutch government has given a dispensation for Winair to fly into Saba, which is, as I said, 600 feet shorter than Montserrat. Saba is part of the Dutch Antilles. They have jurisdiction over Saba. They don't have jurisdiction over Montserrat. So because they don't have jurisdiction, they can't issue themselves a dispensation to fly into Montserrat. That's under ASI. So they can't step on ASI's toes and say, we're not paying attention to you. We know Twin Otters. We've been flying them for 25 or 30 years. We know its performance limitations. And we accept, like the French accept for St. Bart's. They let you use reverse thrust for the landing calculations. And if you're allowed to use reverse thrust for the landing calculations, Montserrat is a no-brainer. It's easy. But the ASI has said, you can't use those for the calculations, so you can't take the airplane in there with that size of a load. They allow you to, the ASI calculation allows you to fly 9 passengers into an Otter into Montserrat. That's not a viable operation.
Where does the RISA come into that whole calculation? And
well, the RISA, from what I can see, is subtracted 60 meters from the available runway for stopping. I think 30 meters at either end. Now, the physical capacity of the runway hasn't changed because they put a RISA in. They've just tried to make it that much safer. In their mind, they're doing their job to make aviation safer, and they're very happy and comfortable with that. The problem is, you can't build a bigger runway. You've operated with the runway that was there before. Nothing really has changed. They're just trying to make it more restrictive to make it safer for you. But basically, they're going to put you out of business. I mean,
my question was really, how does the RISA come into that whole communication about the calculations that are being required?
Okay, so if you look at the runway available for landing with the RISA in it, they've subtracted, I think it's 180 feet or something from the whole calculation. So what you have to do is you go into your graph and you say you've got X amount of runway left to land. In order to achieve a stop in the distance that they've outlined, you have to reduce the landing weight until you get to the point where your airplane will stop before it runs off the end of the runway without reverse thrust. And that takes the airplane from 16 passengers to 9. So you have to give up 7 of the passengers in order to stop before the end without using reverse thrust, in a worst case scenario.
And where does the aircraft start takeoff from, considering the RISA?
Well, I think they wanted to start from where the RISA starts, or end, but at the other end. But, you know, our pilots will use the whole runway for takeoff because runway behind you is no good to you. You want as much runway to use, no matter, even when you're taking off from Barbados. You got 10,000, you got 3 taxiways. You can either take off with 5,000, 8,000, or 10,000. Runway behind you is not of any use to you if you lose an engine. Most people, if they lose an engine, just want to pull the power back and land on the runway and just make it a non-event. Not have the stress of having to fly around the airport on one engine. So if you were to put a camera on all the pilots departing Montserrat, they will all go right to the very end of the runway and take off with the full length, because that's common sense. They're not going to leave runway behind them.
Yes, there's another question that was raised early in our interviews, where the fact that the Twin Otter has 2 pilots as opposed to the Islander having 1. What's the significance of that?
You've got 2 people's judgment on every situation, and the 2 people that are judging, the one in the left seat usually has 10 or more years experience. And that is a massive part of whether you're going to have a problem or not. The biggest danger you can have is having a young pilot who has very little experience, who hasn't seen that situation he's in before. For instance, when you have tropical systems in the area, you get winds out quartering from the west. The winds may change, and the airplane is supposedly there's no wind, and when you're going into land in Montserrat, the winds quarter out of the west, and you end up in a situation where the airplane cannot land within the landing distance or go if he has to overshoot. And that kind of situation may be picked up by a pilot with lots of experience who's been flying around the region for 10 years and seen when there's tropical systems like hurricanes north or south of Montserrat. The only time I really worry about any of my pilots, our pilots, is when we have hurricanes in the region, because that's when the winds are strange and come out of the wrong direction. Unlike other areas in the world, we can't afford to have multiple runways. So most of our runways are east-west, which are perfectly fine when the trades are blowing or there's no wind blowing. But when the systems go through the area, we get winds out of the west, we get winds out of the north, winds out of the south, and the terrain creates all kinds of eddies and currents that make landing on these islands very challenging, and the pilots do not have the option of changing the runway. In our operation, we would make Islander pilots fly around under supervision for up to a year, so they could see all the conditions for a whole year, because the conditions change with the seasons. Hurricane season, trade wind season, the summer when it's hot and sticky. The pilots have to see all those different conditions. And if you hire pilots straight out of flight school or with maybe 500 hours that have flown out of North America or Europe, they have not seen these kind of conditions before, because they have a very limited experience. Our Civil Aviation Authority advises us that it's more difficult for a young pilot to fly a single pilot IFR aircraft like the Islander than it is for them to fly a 2-crew -8 or ATR. Therefore, they're requiring us to have 1,500 hours total time and 500 hours of multi-engine experience to be allowed to be a captain, a solo captain of an aircraft like an Islander. Same with the 402s, same with the Aero Commanders. They think that stress level is much higher for that single pilot flying that airplane. And I think that's one of the big factors. It's who's sitting in the front of that airplane, whether it's an Islander or a Twin Otter, which makes the aircraft safer. You could have the best airplane in the world if it's just one guy with limited experience, it's not a very safe operation. And I think for a pilot to come into Montserrat for their first job, having never flown into Stoll Airport as severe as Montserrat, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. If you notice, most of the pilots that have flown for us and for Carib were in their 40s, 50s, and almost 60 before, some over 60 when they flew the Twin Otter. They've seen it all. The last thing you want is some young man or woman from Ireland or anywhere, basically, with 500 hours coming in to fly people in and out of Montserrat. That's not safe, especially in an islander, single pilot.
You've answered some of the questions we've had for you regarding your qualifications requirement for pilots to fly for SVG. Can you tell us whether mental health checks, given what you have said about the stress levels of flying singly, whether you do mental health screening for your pilots, or because they are generally very experienced that is not required?
All the young pilots we hire, they only get to fly as a co-pilot on the Twin Otters. So we get to see them in action for maybe 5 to 10 years before they make captain. So we've seen them in all different conditions. And after that period, then we assess them for their captain checks. By then, they probably have 1,000 hours of experience. And most of our guys have over 5,000, and the captains have 10 to 20,000 hours of experience.
Yes, I think that's anything else. Honorable? Can you tell us where are your planes inspected and your protocol?
Well, we follow the manufacturer's recommendations for maintenance, and we have an approved aircraft maintenance facility in St. Vincent. It's an ECHA licensed facility. The islanders are maintained between ourselves and St. Vincent and Colin in Antigua, which is also an approved maintenance organization.
Anything on aircraft?
Another matter came up regarding a crash that took place in Antigua. It was said that water in the fuel may have contributed to it. Mm-hmm. How easy is it for water to get into the fuel of an islander compared to getting into the tank of the fuel of a Twin Otter?
Okay, so a piston-powered aircraft has a bigger problem when it ingests water than a Twin Otter would have, which is a turbine-powered airplane. The water in jet fuel kind of gets displaced in the jet fuel. It doesn't all sit at the bottom. If you took a jar of you took a large glass jar and you poured gas in it, which is what the islander burns, and then you poured water in it. The water is heavier than the avgas, so it goes to the bottom. If you put water into a jar of jet fuel, it would be dispersed in little bubbles. It would look like little bubbles all through the fuel. It wouldn't be at the bottom. The problem with water in avgas is when there's a lot of water in the tank. The tank it feeds the engine from the bottom of the tank. So if the engine gets nothing but water, it will extinguish the engine. If you have water in jet fuel, it just goes through the turbine engine without hardly even you wouldn't even know you had really water in the jet fuel. It's not a problem for jet engines. And a turboprop engine that the Twin Otter is really a jet engine with a transmission that drives the propellant. The situation with the avgas powered airplane in Antigua with water, what happens is when you take off and you pull the nose up, if it doesn't have a longer line, sometimes the whole line that feeds the engine is full of water and then the engine quits. There's a modification, a safety modification that dealt with that actually. But it's very unfortunate.
I just need to go back to
just so the passengers for safety. Every time you fuel a avgas powered airplane, you are required to take a little glass jar and go out and to the lowest point in the engine and check for water. If you do that, the water comes out in the glass jar and you stop pulling the water out as soon as you get avgas, because that means all of the water is out the avgas. If you forget to do that, you could have a problem if you have lots of water in your fuel. But the fuel companies do fuel tests daily looking for water and contaminants. That shouldn't happen. The only way it could happen is if you have heavy rain and either the caps on the top of the wings, the seal wasn't good, or you forgot to put the caps down, or you're fueled in the rain, which could be a fueler's problem. It shouldn't happen. But regardless, even if you went and poured water in the tank of an avgas powered airplane, as long as you drained it before you took off, you would get the water out of it. So I don't know what happened that particular day. I can only speculate.
Just a question regarding something you said earlier, and what the flight manager said as well. Can you clarify why reverse thrust is not factored into calculations according to what the flight manager said about it not being supported by the manufacturer?
Well, if it's not supported by the manufacturer, why is it in the flight manual? There's a chart that shows you reverse thrust. What they want, they don't want you to become reliant on using reverse thrust to get into very tight little spots. It's a safety issue. But Montserrat's not a tight little spot. It's an airfield that was proven to be able to be flown in and out of without reverse thrust before they put the RISA there. But if you put the RISA there and you use the reverse thrust in the calculations, you easily can get in and out of Montserrat. I mean, you've watched the airplane land in Montserrat without any maximum reverse thrust. It makes the intersection, even when it's full.
Are you able to help us understand why the RISA was required in 2016 but only enforced in 2022? Is there a reason behind that? Can you help us understand that?
I think it's Annex 14. They're enforcing the regulation. It was a guideline before, and then it was probably enforced later on. They're trying to standardize all the regulations worldwide, so we're all on the exact same level playing field for safety. I mean, you can't knock them for that. But for certain airports like Montserrat and isolated airfields in the Himalayas and in the Andes and in northern Canada and Alaska, there's no, and you look even Courchevel in France. I mean, you're taking off going down like a 10 or 15 degrees runway. I mean, you land uphill and you go down a 15 degree runway. But they've proven it to be safe. And it's licensed for STOL aircraft and special checkouts. Same as St. Bart's. Nobody can just go and land at St. Bart's. You have to be trained. You got to do ground school. You got to do several hours of circuits. And if you're competent and capable at the end of it, they sign you off as being safe to land in St. Bart's. You've been checked out. Montserrat, same thing now. But as long as you've got the right tool for the job and you've got the right training and you have experience, that's all that matters.
You said earlier that there's a school, a university that can assist with doing some assessment and the issue of grandfathering our airport into whatever regulations that we face. Can you explain that once more, because we have to make a recommendation to government?
So Cranfield Aeronautical University does this kind of flight training and flight testing. They have test pilots that will analyze the performance of the aircraft and go through the manual, look at the airfield, apply it, and then they will actually physically come and fly the aircraft on different profiles in and out of Montserrat and prove that it can or cannot do what the flight manual shows it can or cannot do. It's quite common. It's been done many times. I mean, if the gentleman, the captain who used to do it, I think he's still around. His name is Dodge Bailey. I'll try and find you the information and put you in touch.
Thank you. Mr. Gavel, just for the records, does SVG remain overnight in Montserrat?
No, we don't overnight in Montserrat.
Is there a reason for that logistically, or is it, what are your reasons?
The only reason we don't overnight in Montserrat is the pilots live in Antigua, and the flights seem to start and finish in Antigua. because the last flight of the day basically is if people are leaving Montserrat to go catch British Airways, they have to catch that afternoon flight. So we're flying them over to catch British Airways. And then by the time we would turn around, it's dark in Montserrat because you don't have any lights. We've thought about having a crew based in Montserrat, but Fly Montserrat takes care of that because they have crews in Montserrat. So if you have a medical emergency, Captain Harris has pilots there to take people out. So there's no point both of us being there. And the other requirement is if we overnight an airplane in Montserrat, I also have to overnight an aircraft engineer because every night the aircraft are checked. So I'd have to have a pilot and an engineer in Montserrat if they're to overnight.
Thank you. Now, you've shared for us earlier that financially it is not very rewarding to fly with the small numbers. But can you please tell us what undertakings or legal requirements are there for you if passengers were to be delayed or unable to come over on your flight? Are there any arrangements in place for them?
We spent $240,000 last year overnighting passengers that we could not get into Montserrat and Barbuda because of delays. So if it's our fault on the delay, we overnight the passengers at our expense. It's very expensive.
Thank you.
There's one thing I would like to touch on, and that is other aircraft for Montserrat.
Please share.
I am not aware of any aircraft that is safer than the Islander, which is not a very high standard, that is able to land on that runway. There's a new aircraft that's a manufacturer called the Tecnem, which carries 9 passengers. It uses piston-powered avgas burning engines, and that aircraft is $3 million $3 million US dollars. The average Islander sells for 300,000 US new or used. So anybody who comes to you saying that we should look at Tecnems, they're wasting your time. They're 3 million US a copy. You can buy a nice Twin Otter for 4 million. So I wouldn't waste my time with that. The other aircraft that can handle Montserrat would be a Kodiak, which looks like a Caravan. I don't know if you might be familiar with Cessna Caravans. And that is basically a STOL version of a Caravan manufactured by a company called Kodiak. But you would be then in a single engine turbine, which actually would be safer than an Islander because the failure rate on the turbine is better than the 2 engines on the Islander. But then you're also looking at close to $4 million for a 9-seater. So that's not financially viable. In the case, to give you a comparison, SVG Air for 20 years was asked by the government of Grenada to operate Twin Otters on the Carriacou route. Carriacou's slightly longer than Montserrat, so it's not as restricted with the Twin Otter. And for 20 years, we gave them the numbers for the Twin Otter, and they kept saying it was too expensive. And they said, how is it that SVG Air can fly 3 flights a day from St. Vincent to the Grenadines with local traffic at 50 US a seat? And I said to them, it's very easy because SVG Air sells the positioning flights from St. Vincent to Beckwith, Canouan, and Union to the local passengers because we're going into Mustique, Canouan, Union, and Beckwith to pick up people that are spending between $1,000 and $10,000 US dollars a night. Those people are then either going to St. Lucia or they're going to Barbados, where they're spending between $250 and $350 US per person for a ticket. The wealthy holidaymakers are cross-subsidizing the local traffic. I said, the challenge you have with Carriacou is one of the nicest islands in the Caribbean, but it's 40 years behind the other islands in development. There are no 5-star hotels. There's not even a 3-star hotel in Carriacou. I said, because you don't have the wealthy people coming to holiday or own homes in Carriacou, we cannot charge anybody enough money to make a Twin Otter operation viable. So for 20 years, the Grenada government mulled over the idea of subsidizing the service. And 2 years ago, the Keith Mitchell government decided that they would do it as an election promise. So we went and got a twin otter for the government of Carriacou. Unfortunately for Prime Minister Mitchell, he lost out to another prime minister, a young Prime Minister Mitchell, who also had the vision and made the promise of having a twin otter for Carriacou. So for the last year and a half, we have been operating a twin otter for the government of Grenada to service Carriacou and the Grenadines. It's cost, they're not making money, but they'll soon be in a break-even situation. So I tell you this story because Montserrat has got half the traffic of Carriacou, and it will also need subsidies in order for you to operate a twin otter, but that is your safest option.
So then you're saying the main issue between using the Islander and the twin otter would be cost.
It's the main issue, is cost. The other issue which is on the horizon is Britain Norman is in financial trouble. They're the company that makes it the Islander. If they were to fail, we would have less than 6 months before our authority would say you're not allowed to fly those aircraft because the manufacturer can't give you tech support for the airplane. You cannot fly an aircraft commercially.
Are you saying that safety and cost are being weighed here?
Yes, absolutely.
Captain Gavel, if you'll be so kind, we'd want to have your views on interline arrangements, your views on that, given that you operate out of Montserrat, and you know quite often we come with the connections, read from America or Europe. Can you give your views, please? Thank you.
We're quite happy to work with other carriers on interlining. It's just a matter of the government of Grenada having something in place so that we can quickly grab the passengers and their baggage. I think I would like to take the government, the immigration and customs people in Antigua to Barbados, where we move 40 to 50,000 people a year to the Grenadines. When a passenger lands in Barbados, they're not landed in Barbados. We grab them straight off the flight. We send them straight to the gate. We take their baggage tags. We get the bags. They don't go look for their bags. They're never landed in Barbados. They're in transit. Antigua doesn't allow us to do that. So we lose a lot of time having the passengers line up, go through immigration, go through security, get their bags, walk out, check in, and then the same process, they have to go through security, line up, get out to a gate. You're losing an hour. That shouldn't happen. You should have an agreement with the government of Antigua, like we do with the government of Barbados, where if they're not destined for Antigua, why are you clearing and going through all of that rigmarole and losing over an hour? You don't have an hour to lose because you don't have lights. So if those British or Canadian or even American carriers are running a little bit late, especially in the winter when the days are short, there's a high chance, a really good chance that your customers are going to end up sleeping in Antigua. And it's all unnecessary. You just need to coordinate with the Airport Authority of Antigua so that they give you that privilege. Barbados has been doing that for the Grenadines for 40 years. That would solve a lot of your problems. So the interline would not even be an issue.
Thank you so much for that. Just a moment.
As far as cargo, bringing cargo into Montserrat by the Islander or the twin otter, you seem to know quite a bit about both. What's your take on cargo and the challenges you face right now, baggages and otherwise?
Well, the Islander is very limited with 7 passengers, how much you can carry, which is really limiting people. I mean, if you live in Montserrat and you're going to spend $160 US go to Antigua to do some shopping to come back, you really can't bring very much. You basically can only bring maybe 25, 30 kilos at the most, which is not very cost effective for somebody trying to go to Antigua to buy some groceries. Maybe when they go to the doctor and the dentist and they come back with some pharmaceutical products, they can carry it, but there's not enough baggage capacity given the limitations of the runway for the Islander or the Twin Otter at the moment. So we can do cargo flights, and the Islander could fly into Antigua with 1,500 pounds of cargo, but it's not very viable financially for you, when you could probably move that 1,500 pounds for maybe 300-400 EC with a ship.
Captain Cavell, recently Montreal has continued with the subsidy. This subsidy is extended to SVG. Let me establish that first. Okay. What has been the uptake like, and have you had challenges with bookings in that you're unable to meet the needs of the demand?
Well, I think the fine line between the subsidy and the demand, it's not a profitable operation. So when they pull the subsidy from us, we're not making money, and we don't have money to buy replacement parts, engines. I mean, we start having to look at other options, like limiting the service to Montserrat and chasing the business to Dominica, where we can get $2,500 US for a flight. So the less the subsidy, the more we're going to focus on other areas, because there's not enough volume of passengers. And if the volume was there, then there's not enough seats in the plane to take advantage of the volume. I mean, the cost per seat goes way down when you put more seats in a plane. So it's a catch-22. I mean, thank goodness for the subsidy, especially during COVID, because if it wasn't for the subsidy of Montserrat, we would have had to close and sell the aircraft. It was that tight. And we do appreciate that. But what's disappointing is you're not getting the passenger volume you need to make your country viable and your economy viable, because you're not getting enough seats. And we can't give you an aircraft with enough seats because of the restrictions put on by ASI. So it's a catch-22. We're willing to work with you. ASI needs to have a haircut and a shampoo by the British CAA and the British government. I mean, I'm not making any friends with ASI by telling them that, but they're out of touch. Stop waving the regulations. It's time to exercise common sense.
There was a question earlier about night flights. As you know, we don't have a very wide range of services with our hospital here. And we do need to often travel overseas for emergencies. What is your take on night flights and using islanders to carry passengers at night?
That's a very, very risky operation, especially single pilot. You want an aircraft that has got lots of performance leaving Montserrat in the dark. You don't want something that's just barely scraping over the hills. And that's with 2 engines running. You want 2 pilots, 2 set of eyes, and you want something that's got the power when it takes off. It's way above that hill when you're leaving, because you might not see the hill very well in the dark. I mean, are you talking with all the necessary lighting requirements to make it a night operation? That makes it a lot easier on the pilots, because they get the visual cues in order to see where they are, and you have a real perception with lack of horizon. You're taking off from an airport like Montserrat in the dark. I mean, I've done lots of night departures for medevacs in and out the Grenadine Islands with no lights whatsoever. But the challenge with that is, if something goes wrong, your insurance company is not going to cover you. The pilot's family is not going to get any compensation from the insurance company, because he was doing an operation that was not approved and not covered by insurance. So SVG Air has stopped doing medical flights at night because our insurance company says there's no coverage for that. And you don't want the wife or husband of the pilot to have lost their spouse who's gone out there to try and save somebody, and now they have no breadwinner in their family, and they didn't get any compensation for the loss of the pilot, their husband or wife. That's pretty unfair. I mean, unless the British government wants to indemnify the pilots and the operator and say, well, should something goes wrong, there's $500,000 US there for the pilot's family, and $500,000 there for the patient that was departing because we were taking a chance to save that person's life and fly out in the dark. And here's the replacement money guaranteed for the pilots or for the airline's aircraft. I mean, all these things you'll think about after it happens. Most people don't think about it until it happens. So I think that you need to mitigate the risk and have a plan. A lot of the airports have, like Carrick, who, for instance, is not licensed for night operation, and Mustique, they're not licensed for night operation, but they've put adequate lights for emergencies in case they have to move people out. And the pilots they're given the option to fly in or out with these lights. I mean, the lights are basically could be certified for night landings, but they haven't made the expense with ECA to go through that process because it's just very expensive. So the pilots are quite happy since they fly into, say, Mustique 3 times in a day for the last 15 or 20 years, so they could do it blindfolded. They're comfortable to fly in because they got the light so they can see all the obstacles, and they'll depart because they have enough visual acuity to know that they're safe departing and they're not going to hit anything. They'll do it. So Montserrat would need some pretty adequate lighting for even a basic medevac operation at night. To get it licensed as a night operation, that would be quite challenging and very expensive. And that would have to be a 2-crew turbine operation, in my opinion.
Yes. I know, Captain Gavel, that your planes do not overnight in Montserrat, but yet you're an operator in Montserrat, and you were online with us today, and I may presume some other days. The removal of physical, let me say the physical human night security from the airport has, created much concern. Can you share your views on that, although your airplane does not sleep overnight?
We had a real problem both in St. Vincent and in Antigua for years, where we would park the airplanes at night with full fuel because we'd be going somewhere early in the morning, and there's fuel. The fuelers would not be out on time, so we would fuel the airplane the night before. And often, especially in Antigua, we would go out to the airplane in the morning and 50 gallons would be missing. That is a lack of security. The other thing is, who's to say they didn't tamper with something on the aircraft? And you don't want an airplane taking off and you find out, especially in Montserrat, that somebody's done something to your brakes. Somebody's put some sugar or salt in your fuel, because that will mean your engines are going to seize and you're going to have an accident. It's a legal requirement for every aerodrome that I'm aware of to have security at the airport 24/7. I'm surprised that Montserrat doesn't have a contract with a security company to make sure that the aircraft are guarded at night. In St. Vincent, we have 24 hours security at the airport provided by the airport authority. Plus, we have a company called Guardsmen that actually guard our airplane at night. We've had situations in the past where people had put drugs in our aircraft at night that we discovered in the morning. I'm sure Montserrat's not a place where we're going to have much drug trafficking because you haven't got the demand for it, and you're not an access point. But I think it's ludicrous that you haven't got somebody watching the aircraft at night, if that's actually the case.
How does security affect your insurance coverage?
It would only affect the insurance coverage when the insurance company found out that there was an accident or damage caused to the aircraft when there wasn't any security. Until that happens, they wouldn't know any better. But once they did their due diligence, then you'd have a problem. So my question is, does Montserrat not have night security for the aerodrome? Is that what's implied? Because I might have missed that session.
What has transpired is that the physical night security, in terms of human night security, have been removed. But as we heard today, the police patrols, and there is some CTV operation, but that's limited. but we no longer have that physical person there 24/7. The protocol for the police, clearly, and that might have some security risks, was not divulged to the committee. We may consider whether we wish to have that at some point. So in a nutshell, that is what is in existence in Montserrat currently.
Well, it's extremely easy to bring an aircraft down with a cup of salt or sugar in an engine if you were to pour it in fuel. You pour a cup of salt in an aircraft, it will not make it to Antigua, it will not make it back to Montserrat. I hope I'm not giving people ideas, but that's a fact.
You're able to check water in the fuel, but what else can you check? Can you check to see if there's salt or anything else?
No, you'll see floating contaminants which might be dirt or rubber that's, or if you have a fuel tank that's disintegrating or something, but no, you will not see salt or sugar in the fuel.
Captain Gavel, the committee wants to say thank you so much. You've been patient, as many of our witnesses have been, and we truly appreciate that, and just sharing information with us. If there are any other matters or issues or suggestions, recommendations that you wish to share of your own volition, the committee invites you to do that at this point as well.
I am going to be meeting with the manufacturer of the Twin Otter next week in Calgary to go over this exact situation of Montserrat and the field length and the limitations with your resets. It's in de Havilland's interest to solve this issue because they are advertising a STOL aircraft that has go-anywhere capability for remote airports like yours. And they have been delinquent up to now to rise to the challenge, the EASA, the ICAOs, and various other authorities that are putting restrictions on their airplane, which is a proven workhorse that's open to north, the south, and all the remote places around the world. The future sales of their aircraft are in jeopardy now, and they're planning to put out new models, and hopefully they'll change the flight testing and checking so they can get back that mantle that they had, that they were the #1 STOL aircraft of the world. I'm hoping they rise to this challenge, because otherwise we're going to be getting rid of our Twin Otters as well, because soon they won't be good anywhere, unless you're going to Barbados or longer runways.
Thank you very much again for sharing, and should you get any further information, do not hesitate to share that with us. You may do so through our clerk, Dr. Baker. Thanks again.
My pleasure. I'll report back on my results at Viking in de Havilland.
We truly would appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye. Have a good weekend as well.
Thank you as well.
Yes.
We'll take Honorable Claude Hogan at this point. Honorable Hogan, are you hearing us?
Yes, sorry, thank you, I'm here. But I just wanted to say you need to turn off your mics because you're going to get a feedback when I'm speaking or your guest is speaking.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Hogan. We want to welcome you. We also want to extend our apologies for keeping you. I know you were online with us, but we want to thank you nevertheless for remaining with us and appearing before this committee. The committee recognizes that from the genesis of the John A. Osborne Airport, you were very involved as the manager, and we believe that you can share with us your experience, what some of the plans were for our airport, and perhaps even share suggestions, recommendations. We would value that coming from you, Honorable Hogan.
Okay, I'll therefore give a summary overview, but it's in the context of airport that was built very shortly or commenced very shortly after the volcanic eruptions in Montserrat, which was 1995. And then the plans for the airport were started around 2000. And I think that the considerations then were not as they are now, focused on the future of Montserrat and the economy of Montserrat, sustainability of Montserrat, but more so on providing an emergency response, both for maintaining life on Montserrat at the time and to deliver aid and resources and the technicians we needed at that time. So the Johnny Osborne Airport, which was built, was premised on a different set of drivers. Now, that doesn't say that there was no futuristic thinking in it whatsoever, because I recall that the airport was in fact first designed to be built over on the northern side of Gerald's, where the Defense Force barracks were. But then we found from the wind analysis that where it's currently located was more properly oriented into the wind, such that we could have satisfied the ICAO requirements for the airport to land a design aircraft, which was the Twin Otter, more than 90% of the year in order for us to get an edit license as international. Now, some of what you are going through, and I heard Mr. Gavel recently, or just now, talking about studies, and a lot of what he said were matters which were covered in the studies for positioning the airport where it is and for deciding on a design aircraft being the Twin Otter. And that is why the airport was designed. It is still not designed and does not have any start and end with RISA in mind. We had also considered RISA, and we had also considered, the project engineers had also considered what were then optional arresters. The arresters were intended to be physical obstacles at both ends of the airport, which would stop or prevent the aircraft from descending into the ravine at both ends. But the studies which were produced by the scientists and the aircraft officials at the time and engineers, and corroborated by the CAA at the time, suggested that arresters and RISA presented more danger to the aircraft, and there was a greater loss of life from operating those on these small strips. So therefore, the best effort was to seek dispensation from the CAA for the entire airstrip to be utilized. So we went and we went as far as to optimize the length by adding on the 30 meters that they're now calling RISA over into Lookout, and we also added on the tunnel. So the airport is specifically designed for that purpose, and Mr. Gavel, as an expert, has gone through the discussion on the idea behind the aircraft is safety, comfort, and then of course we went into the economic case for the airport at Montserrat. So you're at a point now where we're looking at the future where we have to transition from where we are to something else. And what is really happening, and I think we are overlooking that we are not starting a new airport, is that in fact they're trying to grandfather an Islander as the aircraft for the airport. That is what is going on at the moment. Up to 2007, all of the operations of the Twin Otter by Winia, which were commissioned through the CAA and the British government, were intended to solidify and concretize and grandfather the Twin Otter operations for Montserrat. Unfortunately, Montserrat departed from that path in 2007 and went into the Islander, which now has more data for the Gerald's Airport than the Twin Otter aircraft. And how did we get to a Twin Otter aircraft? Just what Mr. Gavel said. We had to actually convene and produce all of these studies. And we had to convene meetings with the CAA itself in the UK. And we took along the then Governor Longwig with us, because that kind of application for dispensation from Montserrat required the highest level of diplomatic finesse and the involvement of the person who would express the wishes of the regulator himself.
Honorable Hogan, hold a moment. Kindly repeat, we had a heavy vehicle passing.
Yes, I was saying that the coming to a dispensation for the airport to operate, strictly speaking, at Twin Otter required a high level of diplomatic finesse and the engagement and involvement of the then Governor Longwig, who traveled with us to London on many of our missions to have exchanges and review the studies which the CAA considered in relation to Montserrat. But I think the point I'm making is that you're possibly now at a point where where we were in 2005 in starting at Twin Otter operations, and you're at the point of saying, well, we should have continued it, and perhaps now we need to look at revising where we were and seeing why we cannot get the Twin Otter to operate again. But there's no doubt that the effort is to grandfather the Islander from Montserrat. And indeed, it takes a special dispensation, and it takes a special dispensation to have the Twin Otter resume, plus the economic case for the Twin Otter, if you want me to go into that, was also done through a number of studies, which Mr. Gavel himself pointed to about the viability of Montserrat and what it needs in terms of traffic, seat availability for people to be able to come to Montserrat. And that is the attempt. The attempt was to grow the transport demand. If you take the position that you have now, that it's sufficiently comfortable and to move the number of people you have on Montserrat, then what you are saying is that you are satisfied for the next generation of Montserratians to live to age 65 and get $900 a month in welfare. So the economic argument was based on providing a transport that would grow even before the airport itself needed to either grow in length or be relocated. Even back to Bramble was considered. So if you want to have a viable going concern of Montserrat, then certainly you're looking at the right thing. You're looking at transport, because the islanders will never and can never give you the kind of traffic and movement you need to mass the number of people you want to mass on Montserrat, even once or twice a year, but all year round, to make life on Montserrat. So we're looking at the future of Montserrat being in the balance at the moment. Maybe I should stop in case you want to ask me some more specific questions.
You may continue, Honorable Hogan. As we said, we were aware that you were involved from the outset, and this historical information is critical to give us an understanding, and particularly from yourself, and who has been so involved and continues to be involved. So please go along, and if we have any questions, well, I did, but you have answered my questions in giving us the information. So you may continue. Unless you want to give us, for example, you spoke about other options in locating the airport. You just mentioned that, so I made a point at whether you wanted to share with us on that. But I would not want to interrupt your flow once you come back to that one. If you wish to address it now, then that is fine. And that's one of the questions I would have for you at this point. And in 2007, what transpired in 2007 when we seem to have changed our direction in terms of the Twin Otter service in Montserrat?
Okay, I'll make couple points before we get to those questions on the studies. I was listening earlier as well and gathered that there's a current study which was announced regarding the most viable aircraft for the airport, which study was, as I said, concluded in 2005 ahead of the building of the airport, and the airport was actually built for that aircraft and with that aircraft characteristics in mind totally. And Mr. Gavel pointed out, of course, that it's a question of power, and there was the question of safety and comfort, in that we argued vehemently as a government back then and the technicians that there's a level of safety and comfort below which the government of Montserrat in 2005 should have found unacceptable for people who were part of the British Kingdom. And below that was the islander in terms of safety and comfort. And the Twin Otter was somewhere in the middle in terms of safety and comfort for people who are now British citizens. And the same case regarding the Twin Otter was contrasted against the economic argument that, in fact, you would end up biting off a bigger piece of the travel market if you had an aircraft that was going to attract more passengers to use it. So in the analysis, you will see, if you look at the analysis which would be held by MCWL or by ASI itself or the CAA, you will see that there are less people who are likely to travel on the island than there are who travel on the Twin Otter. And there are also very much less of the high-income people that you would want to target for a high-end, highly environmentally sound and paradise island like Montserrat who would want to travel on a Twin Otter. So when we did the calculations, the Twin Otter also satisfied the economic case of providing a bigger pool of people who would want to travel to make tourism viable, or even services industry viable for Montserrat, which is all that it had. That's one of the points on the power of the aircraft. On the question of the safety, and the reverse thrust and the brakes were taken into account, and we were made to understand that the Islander basically was a flying car, and it had a very good brake system, but that was it. But the Twin Otter had, in addition to a superior braking system, what was called the reverse thrust. And part of the presentation to CAA was to allow the government of Montserrat, the operator, which is MCWL, to transfer the risk on the approach and the judgment to the operator to decide if they needed to use reverse thrust, as opposed to accepting liability for whatever the aircraft may use or may not use. Because in a situation that demanded it, even if it were not allowed, one would expect that the pilot would use the reverse thrust, so that the risk on approach is transferred to the operator, and the operator of the aircraft inbound, meaning the captain of the plane, would decide on that use, which would improve the safety for Montserrat, which is why that is covered in the special dispensation. And somebody had asked me earlier about the regulations of the CAA and the ASSI being indistinguishable. Yes, they're indistinguishable, because the ASSI is only a creature under the CAA of the UK. So except for the special dispensation, which are clearly outlined in the operator's license, which are issued through no terms of the airport, the regulatory framework is the same for Montserrat as in the United Kingdom, because it is the state that regulates the air services, and you can check the IQ rules on that. On the question of options for airport, you might recall that during the building of the airport, there was a certain body of people who were adamantly against the airport being built at the size it was. They had very good vision, but as I said, the premise was on an emergency landing facility, as opposed to, say, comparing it to the port, that we're doing the same thing at the port in terms of creating a minor added jetty, when in fact what the island needs is a breakwater, for example. So what we considered at the airport was, okay, let's try to please the adamant group of people by creating a possibility for the airport to be extended both on the east and the west by buying the properties on the hill in Lookout. And we started to basically sanitize Lookout by relocating some of the houses which we paid for. And the tunnel was intended that you can actually stretch backwards to the west as well and extend the runway where it is currently. But unfortunately, a series of events have put that airport out of those determinations as the next long airport, because the site for the hospital was proposed there. A government was trying to get around it by relocating the hospital, or could have, but the hospital is properly sited in the safest spot of Montserrat. So it's being built out, so it's going to be a part of the obstacle limitation that you could never have the airport extended in any case for any larger aircraft other than the Twin Otter. Plus we built the school over there, Lookout School. Now they have solar panels on the same hill, and they have built more houses on the western side of that hill. So the cost of extending back there to the east would be prohibitive, I would suspect. Hence, the grandfathering of the islander is pursued vehemently. And so that was one of the options for which we spent additional monies, but it's not going to work now, I don't think. And in 2005, we also considered that the airport at Bramble might have become reusable with a terminal on the top of the hill, and that aircraft could land and return taxi to the end below the hill at Trans Bay, and the passengers would regress up on top of the hill. But we do not know, these were conditioned on whether how safe the volcano was going to be. So that was one of the options. If the science is saying that it's possible to operate an airport and have the risk of it being covered with lava or whatever, or rocks, but that a terminal building at the top of the the northern hill, I forget what the name is, would still be safe for passengers. The risk analysis would need to be done for Bramble Airport in that regard. I mean, we had not gotten along to doing that because we were just concentrating on the airport at Gerald's. One of the things I want to comment on, of course, is the governance arrangements that we were using and which still should apply are not applicable today. I heard in the last session that, for example, the regulator of Montserrat, or the representative of the regulators, have applied to deal with a matter of which is the most suitable aircraft. Actually, it is the operator's responsibility. That is, it is the government of Montserrat to MCWL who needs to get that and have we have the interest in it anyway, and that is the body who should push it. If ASI wants to do its own desktop study to see what it will consider if government approached it along that line, that's another question. But actually, it's the MCWL government of Montserrat, which is whom I represented, as well as the supervisor, who would have to pursue this with the CAA, the ASI, and retain their own consultant, and through that process, revisit what we already did in 2005. So basically, I think, I hope I've given you sufficient background to proceed with your discussions. And Montserrat currently needs additional transportation, not just twice a year, but in order for Montserrat to be a going concern in the region, to continue to be a government that can sustain life, it would need to increase traffic, both for tourists, its own people, and investors. And we can't just jump from the current to the future, which is why I've been making a case that the ferry in the interim would need to be permanent. Because if we do not continue to pursue a sustainable development plan or viable way of running Montserrat, which puts the people of Montserrat to work, the island will fail and become a wealthiest country that we are saying is going to be taken care of by the British. I'm not so sure that that will ever happen. I was always happy, for example, to resist moving, for example, the welfare ban from 900 to say 1400, because what that means is that you're telling people, never mind, do not bother to try to work on Montserrat. We're going to reduce it to the population that we intended to reduce it to, just to keep it secure when we ordered all the people off the island. If something is going on that we need to be ordered off the island, then we should know about it, and so we can try to plan for it. But I really don't know what is going on, if we're intended to be a wealthier country, or if people are going to be able to live fruitful lives on Montserrat. The economic argument for Montserrat is very strong. And I have to say, as the last speaker, Mr. Gavel, says, there does not seem to be too much common sense if it's a natural human right for people to want to aspire in their own country.
Thank you, Honorable Hogan. You have a question?
Honorable Hogan, I just want to be clear that the studies you mentioned can be made available to the committee. The studies you did regarding economic
2005.
impact of the choices made for the airport, whether the Tunauta or the airport itself, as well as those that refer to the RISA. It was good to hear that they did consider the RISA at the time, and also to get information on how the decision was made to actually add another 30 meters to the airport. And whatever studies that you have referenced or may know should be available, could you please share with the committee?
The names, and
you can. The only problem I have is that while I can speak to the studies, and we even had a wind study, we had economic studies by Halco, if you might remember Halco, and we had all of the safety studies, the aircraft performance studies. These were we went over copiously. The government of Montserrat should either request these studies rather than pretending that we're starting from scratch to find out what is going on in the aviation industry with regard to Montserrat, that these studies can be requested formally by the government of Montserrat. And I tell you why I have to say Montserrat government, because I was the project manager. I'm not the owner of these documents. And obviously my contract and data protection does not allow me to be the one to provide lawfully these studies to even this committee, because I'm not the government of Montserrat. When I finish working on this project, I think I finished completely in about 2007. When I relinquished that position, all of these matters are owned by government of Montserrat and or Halcro and the various organizations that did the various studies on wind, lighting, air traffic control, runway extension, obstacle limitation. All of these studies are available to the government of Montserrat on request because government of Montserrat is the legal owner of these pieces of information. The economic study at Halco is also available because it's a proprietary rights belongs to Montserrat, but it's not my right to share it personally as the former project manager. And I hope you understand that I could share certain things with you in person, but I can't actually say I can hand over those studies myself without exposing myself to liability.
Point taken, Honorable Hogan, with all due respect. Would you then kindly list from memory or from whatever records you have what those studies are so that we can, in an informed way, request those studies? Okay,
all right. I think I just did that. I'll I'll do it in an email, and I'll also try to indicate the organizations that have them. But from my recollection, all of these studies are in Montserrat in the Ministry of Communications and Works.
A question, Honorable Hogan. With your experience, background experience, were you consulted by the consultant hired to do the study for the recommended aircraft?
Not consulted, I was the facilitator on behalf of the project for all of these studies.
I'm referring to the present study being done by the governor's office to determine the more suitable aircraft for Montserrat.
Well, first of all, I cannot see how the regulator could be determining what is not presented to the regulator to determine. It is the government of Montserrat who needs to do this study or retrieve this study and update it or whatever, and then present its position to the regulator. I didn't expect the regulator to consult me. It's like you're running a gun smoke in Montserrat, because I expected that to be done properly. The governor's office, the regulator, and SSI and government of Montserrat have to work very closely together and in harmony to promote the prosperity of Montserrat. But we must be clear on the lines and who is leading at every point of the way, or we're going to get into legal problems and problems with moving forward, because the body who should be doing the moving is standing behind the body who is doing the stopping. And the regulator has not yet been approached. So why would I be approached when it's the government of Montserrat who should, if anything, approach me if they wanted some guidance in this area? And it's the government of Montserrat should be allowed or prodded if the regulator wants to help them to bring this to their attention. But I cannot see if the regulator has already preempted itself. Why would the regulator do a study to convince itself that it should overrule its own study? So it really and truly, the whole thing is governed terribly.
Point well taken. So I assume by your response that you were not consulted neither by the governor's office nor the government of Montserrat on that matter. Thank you.
Definitely neither.
Okay. You set the context.
Anything else?
Honorable Hogan, I want to thank you very much for your contribution. And like we said earlier, should we have any further questions or need any other information, you've set the parameters, and correctly so, in terms of who the documents belong to. But before you go, we give you an opportunity of your own volition to share with us anything further you may wish to share, any suggestions, recommendations, or views on any matter. And we're not restricting you to just today. If you wish to convey further as you consider what's happening, you can do so as well through Dr. Baker, the clerk for the committee. But the opportunity is yours at this point before we thank you for that you may share anything else you wish to at this point.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I want to congratulate the committee on bringing transparency to the matter. I believe we started off very well in 2005. Unfortunately, by 2007, the islander was brought into the picture in Montserrat. And I think that's for the first time at that juncture in 2007, Sweeney was shunted out of the picture. We had, in fact, however, by that time, negotiated with Antigua government using intervention from CAA directly in Antigua. We had these meetings that gave, granted Sweeney these routes through Antigua into Montserrat. The routes are still there because they're in the governance of the CAA, and they have not been recalled by Antigua. And if those routes are for the Sweeney still, and if there is some relenting, and when I say relenting, I'm talking about actually the government of Montserrat taking a more positive position on the air service needs of Montserrat. Positive not in the sense of being able to move 7 people, but a more futuristic visionary statement as to what is the need for transport and what is our plan for the development and prosperity of the prosperity and sustainability of the Montserrat people, and that they can then get together with the regulator if they need to look at these studies and arm with these studies and other professional views to work out a dispensation that would allow Sweeney to resume operation on these routes that it already has. And hopefully that is the path that we will take in the not too distant future. And I like the fight that we are putting up by bringing exposure to it, because the future is at hand here if we're allowed to be grandfathered with an island aircraft. I'm afraid that we won't be growing transport or economy or anything from Montserrat. And it's unfortunate that the Twin Otter service was interrupted in 2007. This now requires great diplomatic finesse on the part of Montserrat government and people, not just to ignore that we were the ones who participated in the interruption of the Twin Otter services in the first place, but that we now realize that the future is linked to our transport needs. And if you can get those commitments, we will need to engage ministers, even in the UK, and regulator. And we need to take the representative, the governor in Montserrat, along on these discussions, as we did with Governor Longrig in 2005, to try and get this grandfathering paved out for Montserrat in respect of the Twin Otter operations as the minimum standard, and from which we can grow to many more Twin Otters, but certainly we will not be able to grow out of a starting point of islanders. And it's unfortunate that we have fallen to this level. I see Paul Gravel has recommended Dodge Bailey, but there are these studies, there's Dodge Bailey, and there myself and other people who are willing to make a case for Montserrat. If our policy position is going to be that we are going to remain as we are all right with 3,000 people, we just want to get some budgetary aid. We don't want our children to earn more than 900 a month. We want to just give them 1,400 and they have no scope of becoming anything more than what they've been pegged to be at 900 on welfare. Then that is a political issue. But if we're dealing with real life, real economy for Montserrat, we have real people, and that is natural justice requires that they have an opportunity for growth, prosperity, and development of their own island, then we need to really come together as a team Montserrat and make this case. I can understand we can have different political views, but this is one of the things in Montserrat I think we have to be united on, because the future of Montserrat relies on the path that this committee has taken to provide or make the case for the provision of a better transport arrangement for Montserrat, and to grandfather, at least for safety, comfort, and an economy for the future, grandfather the twin outer operations for Montserrat. Thank you for having me, and best of luck in your summaries and your outcomes.
Thank you so much, Honorable Hogan, once again, and do have a wonderful weekend. And again, thank you for your patience with us this morning. We truly appreciate that. We do not take your time for granted. Although you're a servant of the people, we know you have things to do as well.
Exactly, exactly, Madam.
Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful weekend, as I said. God bless. Bye-bye. And to
God bless.
our,
Have a good day.
yes, and to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us over the past couple of weeks, for joining us again today. We truly appreciate you taking the time out to share with us, to be a part of this process. And we will say goodbye for today, and we'll make the announcements as we continue to reschedule some of our witnesses that we have. We'll have a few more, and then we will be closing. But as we said, if you have something of importance to share with us, please do so through the clerk, Dr. Baker, at the legislature office. Thank you so much once again, and have a blessed weekend to everyone. Bye-bye.